Hello, how's everyone this evening? Well, tonight, normally we would be saying Happy Passover and everybody would be together and uh, enjoying fellowship on a feast of Yahuwah Elohim that we are commanded to remember. But since we are all basically still quarantined or stuck at home or locked down, whatever you want to call it, we can't gather for our normal Passover. Fortunately, the Torah gives us a second Passover, specifically for those who have touched an unclean body and are unclean. Now, we can consider that the second Passover would also be something that those that are unclean or in an unclean state can observe. So, since we are in the middle of a pandemic, so to speak, we can consider that a type of mold, if you will. And mold brings about uncleanliness. Therefore, we can wait until the second Passover, which would, in this case, be in May, to remember Passover. But for the next several nights, we'll be discussing Passover um, from a couple of different points of view. Um, so we're going to be taking a look at Exodus 12. We're going to start in verse 5, and this is where the Passover is commanded. Okay? Um, we begin with, let's just read through 14. We're going to read Exodus 12, 6 through 14. It says, "Let the lamb be a perfect one, a year-old male. Take it from the sheep or from the goats, and you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same new moon. Then all the assembly of the congregation of Israel shall slay it between the evenings. And they shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and on the lintel of the houses where they eat it. And they shall eat the flesh on that night, roasted in fire, with unleavened bread, with bitter herbs, and they shall eat it. Do not eat it raw, nor boiled at all with water, but roasted in fire, its head with its legs and its inward parts. And do not leave of it until morning, and what remains of it until morning you are to burn with fire. And this is how you eat it: your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. It is the Pesach of Yahuwah. And I shall pass through the land of Mitzrayim, of Egypt, on that night, and I shall strike the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast. And on all the mighty ones of Egypt I shall execute judgment. I am Yahuwah. And the blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I shall pass over you. And let the plague not come on you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. And this day shall become to you a remembrance, and you shall celebrate it as a feast or a festival of Yahuwah throughout your generations. Celebrate it as a festival, an everlasting law." So let's take a look at these verses. Let's take a look at how they relate to us. Okay, if we say Egypt, Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim comes from a root matzor that means to be under siege, to be in bondage, to be pressed in a narrow way, to be stressed, to be strained. Okay, so how do we get out of our Egypts? How do we get out of the bondage that we get ourselves into is the first thing that we have to consider. So let's take a look at this. Let the lamb be a perfect one, a year-old male. Take it from the sheep or from the goats. All right, so let's consider first a year-old male, okay? The word used here is shana for year. Okay, a lamb is an animal that's used to sacrifice for a variety of things: redemption, um, restoration, so deliverance. One of those animals that was killed as a sin offering or as a peace offering. So, but it's a 1 year old male. So if we look at the word shana, yes, it means a year, but it also means to alter something or to change something. So we have to consider that our redemption, deliverance, and restoration can only come through Yahuwah. He'll provide the lamb. Yahusha became the lamb that restored Israel back to a whole. The house of Judah and the house of Israel came back together. But we must understand that we must be willing to change or to alter ourselves, our lives, in order to come into alignment with our Elohim. And this is what makes it perfect. Okay? Elohim's plan of redemption is perfect. That we are or are not in alignment with it will dictate whether his plan of redemption, deliverance, and restoration works for us or does not. Okay? I have to make changes in my life in order to be in alignment with the word of my Elohim and thus be in a relationship where he pulls me out of my Egypt, my bondage, whatever it is that I have allowed myself to chatat, stray off course into. Chatat, we translate that as sin, but it's a very, very overrated word, sin. Chatat, to stray off course. So, how do we do this? Let's consider Exodus 12:6. And you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same new moon. Then all the assembly of the congregation of Israel shall slay it between the evenings. Okay? So, we're not really going to talk about keeping the new moon and waiting for the Abib, the barley, to be in the field, and then looking for the new moon, and then finding the new moon day, and then counting. Okay, there's a specific time for the feasts and festivals of Yahuwah Elohim. We have to keep them according to his calendar. But we're looking more at an application concept as to what Passover really means for us. Other than simply remembering the stories out of the Bible and all that stuff. So you shall keep it until the 14th day. Let's consider that. The 14th day. Okay? 14th. The 14th letter of the alphabet is Nun. That represents... well, the first time we see it as a root of a word in the Torah is in the word nefesh, that means a soul. Okay, so we have to understand who we are, what we are. As Adam, we are a physical being that is animated by the spirit of Elohim, and we contain something called a soul, which is the tablet on which our lives is written. A lot of people talk about the afterlife and all this other stuff. What I do is based on what my physical being acts upon in my life. The thing that gives me life is the breath of life that Elohim breathes within me. Elohim is a word that means a force, a power. It's the very thing that keeps me alive. When we look at basic biophysics, we understand that the human body survives because of various frequencies and all kinds of stuff coming from space that causes the electricity in our bodies to function. Now, I'm not saying that Elohim is the space and the universe and all this, but I'm saying that uh, he said, "Let there be light." Okay. The first thing we have to understand, there's a lot of things to consider in that, but what we also have to consider is that light, the atomic structure of everything, is what brings everything into reality and what basically gives everything life. So I have a spirit, the spirit of Elohim, it belongs to him, that gives me life. And the atom became a living soul. Okay, now I become a living recorder. The soul is what I record everything in my life on. So basically, I'm much like let's say a laptop. Okay, the laptop's a physical thing. It takes action to type things into the laptop. You plug it into the wall to give it life. But you go online and you look at harmless things and things for research and this and that, and it gets recorded to your hard drive permanently in a lot of things. But you go to the wrong places. You spend your life looking at porn or whatever. That's a, a maybe a bad example, but a lot of these things are infected with viruses, and those things get into your laptop and begin to corrupt it. So what happens? Your laptop is going to crash eventually. What do? You take a flash drive, you take one of them little thumb drives, and you pop it in there, and you download your files to the flash drive. Okay? And now you have all your information on this little flash drive that you can put into a new computer and continue doing your work. So if I'm a laptop and I die, then my soul sends all this stuff to a flash drive, and that flash drive goes to my Elohim, and my Elohim reviews what's on that flash drive. And he says, well, this is good. I can put it in this new supercomputer and send it on to Gan Eden, or this is a totally corrupted flash drive. I don't want to put it in my super drive computer. So what happens to that? It gets destroyed. It ceases to be. Okay? So the 14th day then, something about Passover deals with what we are going to, what we have, or what we are willing to record onto our soul. Okay, remember in that first verse that we considered, verse 5, is that we must be willing to change. We must be willing to alter. And if there's something in my life that is recording things that don't need to be on my flash drive, then I need to become aware of that. And I need to change or alter my life. We have a Torah. We have the instruction of Elohim. We have his word. And this allows us to live life in a healthy and sane way. Okay? It's not a religious book. It's a book of instruction on how to live as human beings and be in a relationship with Yahuwah, who is Elohim, the most powerful entity in existence and beyond, the entity that brought everything into existence to start with. Okay? So, with that being said, the congregation of Israel, the assembly of the congregation of Israel shall slay it. Okay, so most people would say, well, this is written to the children of Israel. Okay, so it's an outdated thing. It's history, Israelites, and all this other stuff. Let's consider Bnei Israel. Now, we talked about this maybe in a previous study. Bnei means children, but it comes from the root bana that means to restore, to establish. Israel is a word that means the prince of Elohim, but the word sar also means the authority of. The authority of Elohim. If I am restored and established because I yield to the authority of Elohim, then I am Bnei Israel, as opposed to being Jacob, Yaakov. This simply means to supplant. I cease to supplant the authority of Elohim with my own interpretation, and I yield to the authority of my Elohim. The only way that I can do that is by following the instructions in the book that he's given us. Torah means instruction. So this refers or relates to the souls of those who are willing to yield to the authority of Elohim and by proxy be redeemed, delivered, and restored. And we have to slay it between the evenings. Well, what happens between the evenings? Let's consider evening. The word for evening is arev. The first time that we see the letter ayin as a root of a word in Torah is in the word erev, means evening. Ayin is a Hebrew word that means eye. Ayin as a letter represents perception, discernment, our ability to see, to understand. Okay? Comes in the evening. Evening. What is evening? Twilight. It's either dark or it's light, but it's not one or the other. I have to be able to understand the difference between what is darkness and what is light. In other words, as I move towards Leila, night, the first time that we see the letter Lamed as a root of a word in Torah. Lamed is one of the Hebrew words that means to teach, to instruct. The ancient Proto-Hebrew pictograph of this is a shepherd's goat. It means guidance. That in order for me to perceive, discern, and understand guidance, I'm going to go through a dark area of my life before I reach Boker, the morning, when the day comes, when the light is there. So we have to be willing to discern between what is real and what is not real, what is true and what is not true, what is real about us, what is not real about us, what is true about us, what is not true about us. This is where the question begins to creep in about whether I am willing to be in a relationship with Yahuwah my Elohim, or whether I am more prone to supplant his authority with my own authority throughout my life. Okay? So let's consider verse 7. This is a very important verse, and it brings in what we've just talked about very clearly. And they shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and on the lintel of the houses where they eat it. Okay? So if you take the blood and you put it on the 2 doorposts and the lintel, it forms a letter Het. Het is a Hebrew word that means to stray. Chatat, to stray off course. Het, the Proto-Hebrew pictograph of the Het, is the picture of a wall, the picture of a tent wall. You're either inside or you're outside. The first time that we see the letter Het as a root of the word in the Torah is in the word chebe, that means to hide. Okay, so the one choice in Het is, am I willing to hide from my Elohim by straying off course? The other thing that we consider about Het, though, is the other option, is that all Hebrew letters are composed of Hebrew letters. And Het is composed of the letter Zion, a letter that represents the word of Elohim, his nourishment, his protection, his rest, yoked to the letter Vav, the letter that represents humankind, represents you and I, the flesh. So the other side of Het is a question that am I willing to yoke myself in a relationship with my Elohim by and through his word to receive his protection, nourishment, and rest? Or do I simply want to stay hidden from my Elohim because all I know is how to stray off course? Chatat. Okay? Interesting, the little symbol that connects the Vav to the Zion is called a chuppah. People get married under the chuppah. Am I willing to be in an intimate marriage relationship with my Elohim? And this becomes one of the very important aspects of Passover. Okay, um, and we'll talk about that in a couple of days when we get to the wine and the bread and this and that. Right now, we're just kind of setting it up so that we understand it in a better perspective. Okay. Um, and they shall eat the flesh on that night, roasted in fire with unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Okay. Let's consider for a minute that in Egypt, the lamb was considered a deity, a pagan deity. Okay. So, are we consuming a pagan deity? Okay. Let's consider the word eat. The word for eat is, um, I can't read my writing, ake. Okay. It means to consume, but it also means to destroy, to remove. Okay. Um, flesh. Flesh comes from the word bakar, I'm sorry, basar, but the root of the word basar is besor, that means news. Um, news. It means what is published, what is announced. Okay, so here is a thought that we get at Passover when we eat this lamb, this thing that from an Egypt point of view represents a deity. Is it possible that my beliefs dictate to me what I believe as far as my relationship with Elohim, as far as my relationship with other people, as far as even my relationship with myself? What do I do on Passover? Is a time, a period of time where I have to take a look at myself and ask, are there things that stand in the way of my relationship with my Elohim? Are there things that stand in the way of my relationship with my Elohim or other people that I need to eliminate from my life? Do I have things that I get from news, from what's announced to me, from what's pronounced to me, that I need to filter out and understand what is true and what is not true? Remember, we're eating it from evening to evening. We must be willing to perceive, discern, understand why we believe what we believe. Okay? Let's go to verse 8. And let's continue on verse 8. Unleavened bread, unleavened bread. Without yeast is the bread. Unleavened, okay. Unleavened yeast is leaven. People, I can't tell you how many text messages I get this time of year. Can we eat beans? Can we eat rice? Can we eat popcorn? Those things are not leaven, okay? Those things, yeah, if you boil a bean, it's going to expand, but it's not leaven. Leaven is talking specifically about yeast. I don't really care what the rabbis have to say in the Talmud, okay? But we miss the point if we worry about whether it's a bean or whether it's popcorn. Yeast, things that make mountains out of molehills. Am I consuming things that are irrelevant and turning them into crazy things? Am I worrying excessively about things that I shouldn't be worrying about? Okay, again, it comes from being able to perceive, discern, and understand the light from the darkness, what is real from what is not real, what is true from what is false. Okay, um, let's see what else we got here. Let's go to verse 9. Well, let's talk about bitter herbs. Bitter herbs. Why would I eat something with bitter herbs? Am I bitter about anything during this time? Lots of questions that I'm asking myself. Why am I examining myself so closely? And all of this is going to be very important when we begin our discussion about the wine and the bread. Okay, and this all becomes very important and very relevant when we discuss the supper that Yahusha had with his disciples. Okay, and we will discuss that in uh, probably in the next few Passover lessons. I'm going to try to do these for the next 7 days, so there'll be all that information coming. But again, self-examination right now is key to understanding where we go with this down the road. Okay. All right. Verse 9: Do not eat it raw, nor boiled at all with water, but roast it in fire, its head with its legs and its inward parts. Sounds like haggis. I don't know. Barbacoa and haggis. All right. So do not eat it raw. Do not eat it raw. Okay. I have to be able to understand something. I don't eat raw chicken. Why do I not eat raw chicken? Because it has salmonella. I'll get sick. If I get information, if I get news, if I get, something bizarre, news, something that's pronounced or something that's announced, do I simply take it in without processing it? I have to take that chicken and I have to season it and then I have to cook it. And I have to be aware of when it's at the right temperature on the inside so that I can eat it and it not hurt me. So do not eat it raw. Don't just take something for granted. Look at it, perceive, discern, understand what it is and why you're going to bring it into your belief system or why you're going to reject it from your belief system. Nor boiled at all with water. Okay? So, another word for boiled here, or, boiled, um, I can't remember what the word is, but it also means something that's unripened. Unripened. Do you eat a green banana? No, you wait for the thing to turn yellow. If you ever tried to eat an unripe avocado, it's like eating a brick. You have to let things ripen. Okay? I don't eat chicken raw. I season it and I cook it. But I also have to have the patience to be willing to perceive, discern, understand what I'm taking in and not just jump the gun on something. I can't just believe what everyone else believes because Facebook says believe it. I have to research it and make sure. So don't eat anything that's not ripe. Okay? Has to be roasted with fire. We can consider this is that we must be willing to yoke ourselves to our Elohim and thus be in a connection with him to where our spirit and his spirit is linked and we receive the communication that we have to receive in order to be able to make the right choices. That little voice that says, hey, this is not a good idea. That little voice in the supermarket, and some people have heard this analogy a lot of times, and they're probably saying, "Oh no, not the tomato sauce analogy." But you're in the supermarket, and you always buy Mother Groda's tomato sauce, but something in your head says, "Don't buy Mother Groda's tomato sauce today. Buy the store brand." And you say, "I never buy the store brand." And something very strong says, don't buy Mother Groda's, buy the store brand. So you buy the store brand, you go home and you cook the tomato sauce, and lo and behold, it tastes the same because, tomato sauce is tomato sauce. And then you turn on the news and you find out that, 1 million people have contracted some life-threatening illness because they ate Mother Groda's tomato sauce that day. Am I linked to the spirit of my Elohim? Am I willing to listen? Am I roasting this thing with fire? I'm not boiling it. I'm not eating it raw. Am I roasting it with fire? Am I cooking it so that it is edible? Am I cooking it so that it is edible? Am I looking at the sources of the information that I've received to find out if it's true or not true before I consume it? Its head with its its legs and its inward parts. I'm not just looking at one aspect of this. I have to look at all of the aspects because I'm going to consume the whole thing. I need to be sure that it's all okay to consume. Okay? Verse 11, and this is how you eat it, your loins girded, your sandals on your feet,